And if you live in, for example, in Bogota, or probably a lot of places in the highlands of Ecuador, you have a different accent from the people who live on the coast, or the people that live in Puerto Rico or Cuba or something. So if I could have someone tell me about their experience with people that have different Spanish accents, that would be nice. Can somebody give me an example of someone who has a different Spanish accent?
Well, for example, here in Mexico, within the country, we have different accents. I am actually from Querétaro, so I actually do know San Miguel de Allende, but my husband is from here, from Chiapas. So when I started coming here, I sometimes didn't understand what people were saying because they use so different words. And in here, they are heavily influenced by native tongues. So sometimes over here, people are saying things that I now I understand them, but before I couldn't. So it's different and it's difficult, and that's something that happens a lot throughout Mexico. It depends if you go to the north or to the south or to the middle of the country. So I think that in that way we are similar to the United States because it's a really big country, and the people from different origins have different words. Like for example, here you have the Mayans, and over there the Aztecs, and you have a lot of words from the English language, so it's very different.
You have like probably 50 different languages that are indigenous languages in Mexico, correct? I mean, there's a lot.
Right.
It's so yeah, you have a lot of words which you don't have in the rest of the Spanish language. Like in general, I think people, English speakers at least, find Mexican Spanish fairly easy to understand compared to other languages like Cuban or something, but they have different words, like pavo would be guajalote, and maní would be cacahuate, and you have strange place names like Ixtaccíhuatl and Popocatépetl and those things, which are taken from other languages. So that's, some of it has to do with just words that are different, but also accents.
And my daughter, we have two daughters, and Carmen the third, but our daughter Chris lives in Louisville, Kentucky, which is the biggest city in Kentucky, but she loves it there because her school is all minorities, and she loves that, but also because a lot of Cubans. She said, Mom, I don't have to speak English if I don't want to in Louisville. She loves that. She doesn't have to speak a word of English if she doesn't want to. And that's wonderful. So all the minorities here coming in, all the immigrants coming in, it's like, for example, I see a lot of the young guys doing roof work, and I say, turn on the rancheras real loud because I want to hear, and I'm old. So, and then one of them said the other day, no, they told us we were too loud. I said, no. And I told my husband, because we need a new roof, because we had a storm and the roof is ruined. I said, I'm going to tell them to put that ranchera real up so the whole neighborhood gets real happy. So it's funny how the immigrants have helped here, I think, in our state, have helped a lot.
Well, who else has a story about someone they know or experience with different accents in Spanish?
Me, I guess. Yes, they usually teach us Mexican Spanish in school. And while I was trying to learn Spanish, I learned Mexican Spanish, I guess, in high school. And then I had a Colombian Spanish private tutor. And then, yes, I was trying to figure out where I was going to go on vacation. And we finally decided on Chile, and everybody warned me about Chilean Spanish. They were like, oh no, that's the worst Spanish accent. Like nobody, like even native Spanish speakers don't understand Chileans. And so, yes, you know, when I went there at first, it was a bit difficult. I think I got used to it in the end. And, you know, I watched some Chilean TV shows before I went and Chilean movies before I went. And while I was there, so yeah, it was a bit difficult, but, you know, I survived.
Well, it is different, but I would not say any of these accents are better or worse from, you know, well, from a linguist point of view, at least. Some are
Oh, no, I didn't agree with them. That's
some are
just what
more
the,
prestigious than others,
yes.
but they are definitely an unusual. Well, we didn't go to Chile, but I have a friend who I actually,
Our back neighbor.
yeah, our neighbor who I tutored today, in fact, that is from Chile. But yeah, Argentina and Chile have a pretty similar thing, and Argentina is difficult to understand unless you've been around it.
Mhm.
But, and then there's, of course, Spain, which is a whole nother thing.
Yes.
Anybody else have a story you'd like to share about acquaintances who speak a different version of Spanish?
Can I say something?
Spanish from Spain is a real experience because the Spanish that we are used to say here is nothing compared with the Spanish from Spain. Yes, it is true that in Mexico they have different words, in Colombia, but the problem is that Peruvians, Bolivians, and Ecuadorians, they have another version of the Spanish with Quechua words. And that's the thing. We have a kind of connection. Peruvians, Ecuadorians, Bolivians, sometimes some people from Chile, because in the north of Chile they speak some Quechua, some of them. So that's the thing. But the Spanish that they speak in Spain is other thing. And they invented the Spanish. But we never say, for example, I have to go to my curro, because they say curro, work, and we never say that. I don't hear that Mexicans say that. And for example, we never say, well, they say even foul language as that is normal, and we are a little more polite. It's amazing because in English, British English is polite and American English is not polite. It's informal, but here is different. Spanish from Spain is informal. Is foul language, and Spanish from Latin America is formal.
Well,
We
yeah,
don't have that to say a lot of. You say, okay, I can say foul language, yeah, but
well,
you don't say that many words in British English, but in Spanish they say that.
well, you know, if you think about it,
It's other
Spanish, you said
word.
they invented Spanish, but really, Spanish is just Latin that got twisted around over the years. So Spanish
Right.
has the same changes that everybody else had. And the whole thing about, you know, cerveza and cereza instead of the S sound for the C or the Z is, you know, there's arguments about whether that was original or not. And I think most people would say it was not, but they look at Latin American Spanish as, oh, how can they say cerveza instead of cerveza? You know, it's just, and the same thing with British English and American English. We have some things that are more original than they have, but I think I'm going to go ahead and turn on something about the different forms of American English. Can I share screen?
Yes, you can. Could I say something before
Yeah.
we start, please? I
Yes.
just would like to say that even here in Ecuador, we have different accents. For example, I cannot say that people from the highlands where I live speak better than people from the coast. But in the coast, there are some words or some letters or vowels that people skip. For example, they say, for example, ven pa' acá.
Oh, yeah.
Instead to say ven para acá. But additional, for example, in my hometown, also we speak in a different way. So then I will say that I have the polite Spanish form and also my own Spanish, because
all of us have that.
African Americans were brought here in Ecuador in the condition of slaves, and our original language was stolen. But I guess that my ancestors kept some words. And for example, in my hometown or with my siblings, I will say, ala, vení pa' acá. No me estés molestando. There are certain words that or certain dialects that we use, and that's just for us. That's for us. So, right. But that's Spanish, and that's something different. And finally, I would like to say that I was telling to my students that they must be afraid of making mistakes, because even in Spanish, we have different accents and we have several words. And people from Spain use, for example, the feta. We don't say zapato, we say zapato, and that's Spanish. And what Carlos said, I can't say which English is better, if British English or American English, but often British people think that they are the owners of the language, but maybe not. Well, you develop the language. Too. So this is a discussion, kind of an issue, kind of controversial, but who has the truth? I don't know.
Well, I mean, there is no truth to which one, but better is just subjective. I think that practical is maybe the better question. Which one is more practical? It depends on who you're going to be speaking with. If you're going to be speaking with British people or people that are in India maybe, or in Singapore, you probably would be better off learning British English. If you're going to be speaking mostly with people from the United States and Canada, probably American English, North American English would be preferable. But yeah, there is nothing inferior about even the most despised forms of English. You know, I'm a Southerner, and I have certain little, I'm sure that Lisa could tell you that there are certain things in my accent that are not, you would not hear in Los Angeles, and you would not hear in Indiana, which is just across the river from us.
He's a Southern Democrat.
So you can, yeah, but there's nothing inherently inferior about any of these accents, although some are more liked by different places. I'm going to go ahead and turn. Does anybody else have anything you'd like to say before I go to the
and
recording?
Also think about what you want.
Lisa and Karen.
Go ahead. Go ahead, Lisa.
Yes. Well, I just wanted to say really quickly that I've had to tell my students recently a lot the different meanings of rubber, especially between American English and British English. So yes, the vocabulary can really change depending on the area.
Yes.
And by the way, think of other things you want for next time, because we didn't write last time what you wanted to do this time. So Kelly chose the topic.
Which I've been wanting to do for a while.
Yeah.
Karen, go ahead.
Well, I'd like to add something that I don't know if you know, but here, currently I am not teaching just English, but language and literature. So, and I'm learning Spanish. So, you know, I know Spanish, but I'm learning, linguistic Spanish and everything. Okay, so I have to teach to my students well. So, and I've learned that there in Ecuador, only in Ecuador, there are 15 national languages. 15, no, everybody think that Quechua is the only language besides Spanish that is spoken in South America, but it is not. And in Ecuador, there are 15 ancestral languages that are kept since the conquerors. Yeah, so most of them are spoken in the Amazon region and Esmeraldas in the north. So and there the names we can't even pronounce them in Spanish. So I have to write it down. I have to write it down on the board because even in my students and even myself, I couldn't pronounce those words. So because there are many, Carmen knows that there are many communities here, but they in Ecuador that they still keep their cultures, and there is I'm going to say that like achuar, you know the word achuar chichan, chuar, what is another name? Chuar. Many people think in Ecuador, we think, okay, only chuar is spoken in the Amazon region, but it is not. There are 15 languages spoken over there. So, and I got amazed. Oh my God, how many languages do we speak? So, and that is happening here in Ecuador. I don't know in the other countries in South America. And even in the Mexico itself, we don't know. As you said at the beginning, I don't know, difficult words, even for us to pronounce them. Like, I don't know, but I think that is I don't know. I just wanted about this, that there are many, like 15 ancestral spoken language, and they are active yet, and here in Ecuador. Okay,
That's
thank you.
pretty interesting.
Good, that's interesting. Look, there's Maida from Mexico. That's a different.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to go ahead and share screen, and I'm going to put on something first. There is this video I think is amazing. The guy who talks about accents, while he's talking about the accent of the place, he's speaking in that accent. So listen carefully to how he speaks as well as what he says. It's very interesting. Then there's, hopefully, if we have time, I'll go to one that gives accents around the English-speaking world as well. Okay. Oops, I actually probably need to. Well, not able to get, here we are. More. Here's sound. Hopefully this will work. If you cannot hear, please tell me.
"24 hours of renewed silky soft skin starts in the shower."
You can find out all about
New Dove Body Wash with 24-hour renewing micro moisture is infused with millions of moisturizing micro droplets for lasting softness and care. Discover the Dove difference.
New York City, Trenton, North Carolina, Ocracoke Island, Mississippi, and northern Florida. That's where you get the sort of Blanche Dubois, Scarlett O'Hara kind of classical Southern accent. Hi, my name is Eric Singer. I'm a dialect coach. Today we're going to take a little tour of some of the different accents of English-speaking North America. Now, a couple of quick disclaimers. These are by no means all the accents in North America or even all the English-speaking ones. And
can everybody hear okay?
Not everyone from the same place sounds the same. Accents vary by socioeconomic background, generation, ethnicity, and race, and all kinds of individual factors. Because in a very real way, accent is identity. Different people from the same place have more or less localizable accents, and that usually has to do with identity too. Now, on some of our stops, we're going to be looking at some of the most distinctive and interesting local features, but it doesn't.
I'm going to stop here for just a minute. Now, his accent is fairly, I guess we would call it neutral. You can't tell where he's from. He doesn't have the sort of accent that is regional.
Doesn't mean that everyone from there has that accent or has it to the same degree. I'm also going to have some linguists and language experts from around the continent join me today to lend their expertise in some of these areas.
Hi, I'm Megan Figueroa.
Hi, I'm Nicole.
Peace. I'm Sun Michaud.
Hi, I'm Kalina.
Hi, I'm Imani Doran.
One of the things you'll notice along the way is that accents often don't follow political boundaries, especially ones like state lines. They'll follow.
I think this is a very interesting map because it's showing areas where you have very different accents. You have, of course, you can see Kentucky is right here. It's the northernmost part of the southern group, but if you cross the river, either into Ohio or Indiana, you can see that it's in the Midland, which is probably for the most part, a more neutral accent. The Western also is fairly neutral. You can't necessarily tell where people are from, but you also have a couple of Northern accents here. My parents were pretty much in this group. And then you have some, what we consider very unusual Northern accents up here, which would be Minnesota. Then you have New England. So there are all these different groups. That's just the general idea. Any questions?
Major geographical boundaries, things like mountains, for sure. But what regional accent differences mostly reflect is settlement patterns and contact. Historically isolated communities like Ocracoke Island in the Outer Banks of North Carolina, or the Sea Islands in the Lowcountry in Georgia, can have really distinctive speechways. They've had the time and isolation necessary to diverge and develop them. That's the other thing that makes for accent variety: time. There's a lot more accent diversity in the British Isles, for example, where there are local populations that have been speaking English in their particular way for hundreds and hundreds of years.
So in England, there is not one accent. There are many accents, and if you got the information that I sent today, you'll see actually one on just the British Isles. So you can check that out for yourself as well.
And there's more accent diversity on the east coast of the US than there is west of the Mississippi. It's been settled by English speakers longer. The first places English was spoken in North America were Roanoke, Jamestown, and of course, Plymouth, Massachusetts, where the Pilgrims landed in 1620. So let's start there. The Pilgrims spoke with what we call rhotic accents, meaning they said all their R's. In fact, so did almost all English speakers in 1620.
Okay, if you listen to the way he's talking, he's speaking like British people would speak in 1620. So they say their R's like the English do not typically now.
1620, including the ones in England. That's right, a Southern English accent might have used to sound something like this. It was only in the late 18th century that
and now he's changed accents to what would be the more normal English accent today.
Fashionable young people in and around London started dropping their R's, and from there the trend spread to America. Now, north of Plymouth Rock, we have Harvard Yard, one of the places you might hear a Boston accent today.
Okay, now Boston, of course, is a very sophisticated city, but they have at least some speakers in the Boston area have a very distinctive accent. And he's speaking in this accent now.
Typical Boston accents, of course, are non-rhotic, meaning no R sounds in park your car in Harvard Yard. Let's all get in the car and head south down the coast now into Rhode Island.
Okay, so he is saying park your car in the Harvard Yard, which is not only doesn't have R's, but it has different vowels. So that is, if you think that Boston's accent is neutral, there's a good example that at least for some speakers, it certainly isn't. I'm going to skip a few of these because it's a long video. Oh.
Oh, that's interesting.
So many accents. They don't vary by borough, by the way. That's a myth. I know you guys are going to tell me to forget about it, but
okay, he's just said something which is stereotypical New York, which is forget about it, as if it were one word. And he also said use guys. So this is sort of one of many accents that you can have in New York. And this is not a particularly prestigious accent. So again, New York is a place that has an accent that you can tell where people are from, at least for some speakers.
I'm sorry, sociolinguists have studied this really carefully, and there just really isn't any such thing as a specifically Brooklyn or specifically Bronx accent. There certainly are a lot of different New York City accents, but they vary by socioeconomic background and by ethnicity and other aspects of group belonging and identity, more than by neighborhood or by borough.
Notice he's saying more instead of more.
Historically non-rhotic, though that's changing some in the youngest generations for sure. Here's something fun most of them have in common. The tongue tip hits the teeth, or close to them, on TD and N sounds instead of, a little further back. So you can hear that in like this kind of New York City accent, tongue tip on the teeth, Times Square, New York City, and this kind of New York accent, 22nd Street, Times Square, Dumbo, taxis, traffic, and so on. Okay, so you may have noticed that all of these accents I've talked about so far sound pretty white. I'm going to take a pause here, and linguist Nicole Holiday.
Hi everyone, Mark Barden here at Sandy Hook Promise.
This is a commercial, sorry.
On December 14th, 2012, my 7-year-old son
Holiday is going to go a little deeper on African American English varieties. My colleague Amani Dorn is going to demonstrate some of those accents.
Hi, I'm Nicole Holiday, and I'm a linguist. As we know, New York has all kinds of people in it. African American English has a lot of shared features across regions because of its history. So Black people in Africa were kidnapped and brought to what is now the United States. At the time, they didn't all speak the same languages. They spoke multiple different African languages. And those languages came into contact not only with each other, but those languages were also coming into contact with the English spoken by the colonizers. This created a situation where there was a really unusual learning exposure to English, right? So there are all of these languages in contact with each other. And for economic and survival reasons, the enslaved people had to, in some ways, acquire English. But the English that they were acquiring was not like what you learn in the classroom, right? It was under this really unusual situation of acquisition. So some of the features that we see in modern African American English are a result of this contact between the African languages as well as the English spoken by colonizers, and those features have persisted over generations. After slavery was legally ended, the majority of African Americans remained in the South but experienced really extreme segregation. This led to different varieties of English being spoken in Black and white communities within the South, and even as they moved north during the Great Migration.
Nicole, how did the Great Migration influence accents?
The English that we see today spoken by African Americans has some features that have persisted throughout generations. TH stopping, so that might be using something like a D sound for where you see a written TH, so dat for that. You can hear that in this clip.
They said I could participate online. They said I could participate online.
So she's saying they instead of they.
Vocalization, so that's an L turning into a vowel in a word like pool or pull. Might sound something like pool or pull.
Which, by the way, they do this in Brazilian Portuguese also, which I find interesting because we share that with the South. We tend to do that sometimes in the South as well.
That's cool. That's cool.
We also see consonant cluster simplification. If you have a series of consonants at the end of a word, you might see them turn into just one consonant. So in a word like west, you might hear it pronounced as west.
It's been a
And by the way, several of these things, including this, are things that tend to happen with Spanish speakers as well. Not the one about the L, but this one.
minute, but she just left. She just left.
And
so left instead of left.
Anything specific to New York?
One feature common in New York City is what we call a raised vowel in words like thought and cloth. It sounds something like aw.
Coffee without froth on top isn't coffee at all.
So this has nothing to do with race, actually. The wa sound for the ah is something that a lot of different groups in New York would be distinguished by.
Let's get it together.
Okay, let's go back to Eric.
Thank you, Nicole. And even that's just the tip of the iceberg for linguistic diversity in this incredibly diverse city. Around 50% of New Yorkers speak language.
Any questions so far? Or a conversation about it?
Now look at that, 50% of New Yorkers.
Yeah, so Kelly, I have a friend of mine he's from United States. He's a soldier, ex-Marine or I don't know, ex-US Army, something like that. Okay, he lived in New York. So, and he said that also he's Afro Puerto Rican, I think. So, and what he said that his English is a mix of Ivory or Jamaican or something like that. I sometimes I don't understand him because he speak like the word you said, like the I don't
like
coffee. Yeah, and see, like, and he said that if someone that doesn't understand them, we don't speak English at all. So if we don't speak like them, or if you don't understand a New Yorker, so you don't speak English. So and I think, okay, so what am I speaking? So and that is what he said.
That's local. That's local pride. You know, that's New York thinking that they're very important, which they are. But you know, they are outliers. I would say they are not. Well, that particular accent is not an accent that most people in the United States would either try to have, or it's sort of unusual. Just like Southern English, it's sort of unusual.
I think Karen, he's pulling your leg, and I don't know if everyone understands that term, pulling your leg, but it's in Spanish is joking or
tomando el pelo.
Tomando el pelo, yeah.
Yeah, they're not that special, right? They're not that special.
Well, it's special, but it's really more. It would be similar to like Southern English or maybe Cuban Spanish or something that, you know, Cubans have a lot of pride, you know, they consider themselves superior to in a way, but their English or their Spanish is very different from other people's Spanish. So I think it's like that. Well, and we can look, the next thing is about actually Spanish speakers in New York. Let's see if we can hear that.
Yeah.
Languages other than English at home. And for half of those, that language is Spanish. Megan Figueroa is here to tell us a little bit about one of those varieties, a variety linguists call New York Latino English.
New York Latino English is heavily influenced by Puerto Rican Spanish and Dominican Spanish. One remarkable feature of this,
which are very different from what most of you speak, right? Because the coastal Spanish is different from most of Mexico and most of Ecuador.
Variety is a light L, the sound that you would find in a word like, love, leaf.
Right, so New York Latino English speakers have a particularly light L. You can hear that in this native speaker clip.
I guess growing up, I know what it's like to not have a lie. I know what it's like to not have a lie.
In contrast.
Okay, so this is a minor thing that I have mentioned to you before, that the L in English, well, they're going to call it a dark L, which has more O to it, like, we'll see that.
That's the light L. When you produce the dark L, the back of your tongue bunches. So think about the words milk and pull. The lighter L was a feature of New York Latino English.
So instead of saying milk and pull, a Spanish-speaking person anywhere in the US might say milk and pull, right? With a different kind of L.
But Latinx people are a very diverse group of people, and they speak a variety of varieties. We'll get to more of those later.
Thank you, Meg.
Oh, and by the way, when it talks about African-American or Spanish influences on language, there's tremendous difference in the way that people speak according to race. So you can't make big generalizations about it. But I think that any minority community has, and well, majority communities too, but even, in my experience, people who are from the same town, when they get together, they speak a different dialect than they will when they're at work, for example. If they're with family or something, they speak something that's more strange and more sort of a group thing. Like you have this secret language that you kind of enjoy because you're different and you belong to this group. But we'll move on.
Megan. And this single feature is a good contrast with other New York accents, by the way, because most other New York accents have pretty dark L's. Lots of lemon lollipops, la la. I like to lick them. So now, as we leave New York and head south into Jersey and towards Philadelphia, we cross a major dialect boundary, the on line. Now, north of this line, most people say on, rhymes with don. South of it, they say on, rhymes with dawn. Of course, this doesn't apply at all if you rhyme dawn and dawn, only if you have two distinct pronunciations. That's called.
And by the way, in most of the South, it's also going to be on and not on.
Called the cot merger, but we'll talk more about that later. There are a few major dialect areas in the U.S., and one of the biggest dividing lines is between northern dialects and midland dialects. The on line basically runs right along this boundary. So as we cross over it somewhere around Trenton, we've crossed from the north to the Midlands, dialect-wise. Now, another thing that starts to happen as we get down towards Philly is that the goat diphthong starts to move forwards in the mouth. So we get go, hoagies. You want to go get some hoagies? Go gets maybe even a little further forward.
Okay, so we would say go, and they might say go.
As we get down to Baltimore, especially, Danny Ocean. You want to go Danny Ocean on Wednesday? Let's make a quick stop in D.C., where Nicole has some really...
I'm going to skip a little bit here, just to...
You might want to see DC, because it's the capital.
I have watched this 3 times, but if you want to, we don't have time.
Interesting stuff on the prosody of local African-American speakers.
In my research, I study prosody, which has to do with the tone and intonation of the phrase itself. In a study, I found that African American speakers may be more likely to ask a yes-no question with a level tone or a falling tone. For white speakers, we expect a rising tone in questions like these. So something like, did you do the dishes? But African American speakers may be more likely to say something like, did you do the dishes? Another feature that we see in DC, similar to New York, is the raised thought cloth vowel, that ah. This is a new feature in DC, and we think it's part of a pattern of DC varieties becoming more like northern cities as opposed to the South. You can hear that in this clip.
Change is needed, but at what cost? At what cost? Cost.
Okay, let's go back to Eric.
Now we take a quick detour.
So we're talking about fairly subtle vowel things here. I'm not sure if you can hear them, the difference between cost and cost. But when I was in a linguistics class, we were talking about that as a different phonetic sound. I was thinking, in my personal dialect, it's not.
Tour over to Pittsburgh. Yous are the only people in all of North America that smooths the mouth diphthong, except for maybe Chicago sometimes. Now, smoothing is when you take a diphthong, like ow, and smooth it out so it's just one sound, ah. Just like we have price smoothing in much of the South, so that I smooths out to just price. Same thing here.
No, the price thing is something that you would hear in rural Kentucky every day, right? So they would not typically say price, they would say price. And instead of I, it would be I. But again, it has to do with social groups and, are you in a city or are you in the country?
Except with the mouth vowel, smoothing out to a long sound. Yins want to meet downtown, go shopping for catches? Heading back over to the Delmarva Peninsula, as we head down into Virginia, we get something.
I'm going to skip this part and go, let's see where we are here. Okay, North Carolina is an interesting one. We tend to get some
24 hours of renewed silky soft skin starts
Sorry
in the
about
shower.
this. We have to watch commercials.
New Dove
in order
body
to
wash
see
with 24-hour renewing micro moisture is infused with millions of moisturizing micro droplets for
Think everybody
lasting
want to go
softness
out and
and
take a
care.
shower?
Discover the Dove difference.
We really start to hear pretty significant goat fronting again. So the vowel sound in boat, most, hope starts with the tongue further forwards in the mouth. O. Interestingly, goat front.
Can you hear the difference between goat and goat? A boat. You can hear him, but they're a bunch of vowel sounds that don't exist in Spanish, so it may be difficult to hear, but it's different from what would be more normal English. And it's not, by the way, something that we have in our part of the South, something that they would have in North Carolina, closer to the coast.
Fronting, which is now widespread in a lot of the American South, seems to have originated in North Carolina sometime in the last part of
Notice he said North Carolina instead of North Carolina. Carolina. That would be a typical Southern pronunciation there.
What is that sound like North Carolina? Lana.
It would be just like the in Spanish.
Carolina.
See,
Why
what we would, what we would typically do, we would make it a diphthong, Carolina. It would go from the to the E, Carolina. But in much of the South, in the rural part particularly, they would make the I sound like the right? North Carolina. It would be a single, and it's interesting, it's written as a single vowel, but in more traditional, typical English accents that are not regional, it would have the diphthong of I, like the letter I.
So what do you say that is correctly spoken? You use it would be better if you say North Carolina or North Carolina.
If you're in North Carolina, it might be okay to say North Carolina, but I would recommend for most people to use as sort of a non-regional North American accent as you can. So I would stick with North Carolina. There's nothing wrong with that Southern pronunciation, other than it's not appreciated in all parts of the United States.
All right.
So if you're speaking with most people, you would not want to. It sounds a little bit like you're from a rural area in the South, which you probably don't want to give that impression. Not that there's anything wrong with it. I'm from a rural area in the South.
the 19th century. Remember that regional dialect boundaries don't necessarily follow political boundaries. They follow settlement patterns and contact patterns between populations. So the inland part of North Carolina, which is in the Appalachian Highlands, the original European settlers were Scotch-Irish folks.
So he's doing a great imitation of North Carolina accent here. I used to live in.
I am listening to him. Yeah.
Some Germans moving southwest from Pennsylvania. Due to being relatively inaccessible.
Pennsylvania is interesting because that's one where they typically don't have a diphthong in more normal standard English, and they do here. Vania. It goes from the I, the A. Vania. Pennsylvania.
Accessible and isolated for a long time, the accent is distinct from the lowlands and from the coastal areas. The isolated speech communities are fascinating because we can get some really interesting sound.
You notice fascinating. It did not pronounce the G at the end, which is pretty typical, not just in the South, but in a lot of areas where people are talking informally.
Sound patterns. Up here you get some really dramatic face lowering, for example. So the diphthong in face starts real low, down around a, face, la.
So here is one where the beginning vowel of the diphthong is different from what's more standard, face. And we would not do this where I am. This is a little different. Maybe in the mountains they would have this more, but not where I am.
Light, day, You'll also get some particular dialect features, so words and word order and grammar things that stretch way back to those original settlers from Scotland and Northern Ireland.
How they
Things
pronounce,
like a hunting and a fishing, and extra
if
sounds
we
too,
learn
like the R sound.
the other pronunciation, I think that we have to use that pronunciation, no? But we know something else about the pronunciation of some other states.
I think it's very useful for you to be able to know and understand all of these things.
Yes.
I would generally recommend for people to use what would be a more non-regional English. But again, I've said this, 10 times. That there is no better accent. There are only accents which are maybe more acceptable in more different places.
Yes, maybe in Miami we can hear something more the sound of Spanish than English. Maybe because there live a lot of people of Latin America.
Yes. Did you hear the part where we were talking about Hispanics in New York? I don't know if you were here then, but that was one of the things that it mentioned. The pronunciation of the L would be different. These are not first generation people. These are people that have been there for maybe more than one generation.
Okay. No, I
In
didn't.
And the H sound in hit. Get on with hit. Here's Nicole again to talk a little bit about African American speech in Southern Appalachia.
Hi again. So African Americans in Appalachia are understudied, mostly because stereotypes of Appalachia are very, very white. African Americans in Appalachia may be more likely to be rhotic. So in words like floor.
Why up there on the fourth floor?
I'm sorry?
It's cold in Bolivia today.
Oh.
Floor.
You'll get the R, whereas in other places you might get flo. African Americans in Appalachia.
So in other words, that's more like where I am, where we would always speak the R. So in Appalachia, race would not make that difference. It would be more typical for the rest of our group of the Southern. There are very few Southern accents where they don't use the final R.
Yeah.
Over here.
Outer Banks, there's an even more historically isolated community.
Southern speakers. Since encountering white,
Some of these isolated communities, but it's not true across the board. There are actually plenty of accent differences that are getting more and more distinct over time. But of course, it's a complex picture. There are parts of the South that don't have all that much Southern about them, accent-wise. Raleigh, North Carolina, and Austin, Texas are two good examples.
So what he's part of what he's getting at is if you live in a big cosmopolitan city in the South, you will not sound like the farmer who lives 50 miles from there. You'll sound very different and much less regional.
A lot of people from those two cities may be pretty hard to identify by their accents. Which brings us to what is sometimes called General American. What's General American? The first thing is, it's not one accent. It's basically a terrible term for a wide variety of accents that essentially don't have a lot of obvious regionally distinctive features in them. We're going to talk to Sun Michaud now. Sun is a native speaker of...
I'm going to skip this part because it's so unusual. Let's see. I think I might go right to here. Oh, no.
Considering outdoor lighting for your property? Contact us today for a complimentary design consultation.
Okay, I think I'm going to stop this.
What's up?
Hi, Jira. We brought you here today to let you know that we made the
Chicago and Southern California, and yes, absolutely, we'll get out and about up in Canada. See you next time.
Okay, I would love to hear all this, but I would like for you to hear something about other languages, other English accents around the world. So I'm going to go on to that. Any questions before we continue on with that?
A comment.
I have a comment.
Yes.
When you think of an English accent, what do you think of? This?
Okay, yes, go ahead.
I think that this is the process is learned to English, right? But I think it's good know about the accents. For example, I studied with Indian partners. It's so difficult understanding because the accent they use very different. For example, what is your name? What is your name? The accent in each word is difficult understanding. So I think this is very important. Know the accent they each pay.
It's always helpful to understand, you know, whatever English you're going to be exposed to, even if it's not the one you want to speak. Just like, you know, for me, it would be a problem if I didn't understand Spanish and only understood, you know, maybe Cuban Spanish or something. Yeah.
Cuban
So
Spanish.
you may not want
Yeah.
you may not want to speak like all these people, but it's good for you to understand it. It's good for you to appreciate that these are all legitimate accents there's nothing wrong with them. I'm going to go ahead and play this. Anybody else?
Fine, keep it going. Okay. Good morning or good afternoon for everyone. This is my first time to take part in this class.
Hey, thank you.
So now I heard about the accent. I cannot say satisfied, but what can I say? I'm impressed or to heard that when you said that is sometimes when the Spanish people speak, you don't get them because the harder part of English for me is listening, and I noticed that as we have a lot of people, at the same time we have a multiple accent. For example, in the United States, sometimes every time when I see American people, I stop to listen to them, and I remark that each people, even each person, has his accent. For example, one day I was in Baltimore. Some guy told me that he speak with me and thought that Yadamin. I heard that Yadamin. I asked myself, but what he say? And after that, when I think in a little bit, I understand that he said that, do you know what I mean? But he said, I heard Yadamin. But by the time I also understand that it was a slang too. But profoundly, it was English. He speak English, but the accent transformed the expression because he say, "I heard Yadamin."
So what he was saying was, "Do you know what I mean?" Correct?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
You want to say, "Do you know what I mean?" But
you know what I mean? Yeah, we can run that all together, and that's not even necessarily an accent. That's linked speech.
Okay.
Where are you located? Where are you now?
Oh, now I'm in Maryland, but I'm from Cameroon.
Okay.
Good.
Great.
Yeah.
Yeah, linked speech does that. We can say, you know what I mean? Could be, you could have, this could all be as short as one word. You know what I mean?
Yeah. The link, I think, is a link word. You link the word.
Yeah, linked speech. That's right.
Yeah.
That's normal.
Okay.
Well,
for English learner,
in any of these accents, we could do that.
Yeah, that's normal.
Let's listen to the Queen here. I actually probably go back to the beginning again.
That
We're
is
going to
not
hear
my
some
best.
international Englishes that are not from the United States.
When you think of an English accent,
That is
what do you
normal
think
job
of?
for
This?
English learner.
I'm
is the
speaking to
tricky,
you at what
tricky
I
part,
know is an
because it's
increasingly
not
challenging
easy
time.
to
Ah, the
detect
Queen's English,
this
spoken
kind
by
of
pretty much
situation
just the Queen.
easy.
Okay,
It's not easy
how
for
about
English
this?
learner.
Oh, what, ladies and gents? Dick Van Dyke,
Will you
Hollywood's
please,
version
Daddy,
of a London
pause
Cockney
the video
accent. To
because
be honest, it's as
Donald
authentic.
is still talking.
I'm sorry?
Will you please pause the video? I think he was still talking. Donald.
The video is running.
Yeah, it was running, but he was talking. Keep going, please. I'm sorry.
As a £9 note. See, when I think of an English accent, I think of this.
Notice that I said Toronto and not Toronto.
All right, I've got three pronunciation features of the Australian accent to share.
This small, what can I say, small history what I have in Baltimore when someone said, do you know what I mean? But I heard, yeah, that mean, and it was very tricky for me to listen him.
Hey, Donald, can you mute for just a few minutes while we play this video?
Okay.
So we don't say father, mother, we say father, mother, sister.
You might know that India is a multilingual, multicultural country.
With a Jersey accent from the north, we don't say ah, it becomes more or.
English is spoken by roughly 1.3 billion people, the majority of which are non-native speakers. Linguist David Crystal estimates that the ratio is roughly 3 to 1. English doesn't just belong to the Queen, it belongs to anyone that speaks it. Now, accents are a wonderful part of language and they can vary so much. Someone's accent can depend on where they're from, their socio-economic background, their age, their race or ethnicity, their cultural influences, and so much more. Now, this video is a celebration of the sheer variety of English accents around the world. Now, I've invited some awesome people to teach you a little bit about their accent. They'll give you a little bit of background information and then they'll teach us a few pronunciation features so that we can identify their accents more easily. Now, this is a big video, guys, so feel free to skip to the parts that you're most interested in.
Hey there, I'm Emma from the English YouTube channel. I'm also from Australia. And here we don't have the regional dialects that are so prominent in the UK and the US. It's actually quite hard to pick from where within Australia an Australian is from. There is definitely a more pronounced, posh Australian accent and a more broad, ochre Australian accent, which is the one that you'll recognize from movies and it's always poorly done by non-Australian English speakers. But that difference in those two accents or dialects is not really based on geography, it's more based on social circles and culture. All right, I've got three pronunciation features of the Australian accent to share. One we share in common with British English, the other with American English, and one is distinctly Australian. I'll let you guess which one is which. But first up, we don't pronounce the R sound at the end of words, like teacher, blister, weather. So that final sound is a schwa, the is silent. Unless the word following starts with a vowel and then the sound becomes a linking sound. Power up becomes power up, power up.
So they do both ways. They do the American way and the British way, depending on whether the R is followed by a vowel.
Second, we usually use the flap T between vowels, and that means that the T sound sounds more like a D. Water, butter, letter. Got it? Now,
so those of you that have been in the phonetics part of this class know that we do that in American English as well. Only we put the R at the end.
Australian accent is really defined by its vowels, and it's often referred to as a drawl. It's not the most flattering of words or pronunciation types at all. But most distinct, I think, is the O vowel sound, the diphthong sound, O. This is the sound that I can detect in any of my non-native speaking English students. I can hear that O if they've spent any time in Australia. And you can hear it in really, really common words like go, soap, though, so often, right?
It's probably a little difficult to hear the difference, but their diphthong is different from ours. Let me go on to another one here. Let's see, Canadian is so close to American here that I won't go over that one. We don't have enough time. Irish, we'll try Irish.
So I'm Diane, and I'm going to talk to you about the Irish accent. Well, okay, no, that's kind of wrong right out the gates. There is no one Irish accent. In fact, Ireland has the most accents per capita of anywhere in the world. From one side of the city to the other, you'll find two completely different accents. Take Dublin, for example. I have a South Dublin accent because I'm from the south side of Dublin. On the north side of Dublin, you'll find people have a much thicker accent. For example, Colin Farrell is from the north side of Dublin and his accent is just a wee bit thicker.
And who gets into hell and all that?
The Irish accent is more commonly referred to as a brogue, and it's probably the accent people most complain about people getting wrong in films. I'm going to say that's because they attempt to do an Irish accent and they don't pick a specific place. If they were, a good place to start might be one of the 4 provinces: Leinster, Ulster, Munster and Connacht. Now, each of those...
So Ireland is not a huge country, but they have all of these different accents depending on where you are. But to me, the Irish accent is probably one of the closer, except for Canadian maybe one of the closer ones to the accent in the United States. Have any of you met people from Ireland?
Yes, I've met teachers.
Yeah. So what's your opinion of the Irish accent? Does it seem kind of not too different from the American accent?
I find it cute. And I like the way that they pronounce the U sound. They don't say Dublin, they say Dublin, something like that. Yeah.
My daughter went to, I guess, she was in Ireland for about 6 months studying in Limerick, and yeah, she loved it. Well, I'm going to turn this back on if nobody has any more comments.
Let's get another answer.
Yeah, the first time I remember that when I used to work in a volunteer program. So, and one of those volunteers were from Ireland, and honestly, I just couldn't understand them at all. So, and I said, oh my God, how am I going to communicate with these people? Because I don't understand them. And even it was a little frustrated. Even I asked my Americans friends, please translate what is there. And they told me, Karen, believe me, even us don't understand what they are saying. And I said, oh my gosh, and what am I going to do? Then it took interaction time, like few days for them, and then for me like a week or more probably, so I could understand at the end. But it was like it was a little stronger. It was really strong, the accent. So and the vowels and everything, and that. If you ask me what is when I have the most difficult time when I have to understand someone speaking in English is when I have to understand Irish people, because it is I don't know. So it's really hard.
Well, some Irish dialects or not dialects, accents are more difficult for us than others too. So she obviously has a pretty neutral Irish accent, neutral in the sense that it's not that different from ours. But yeah, some of them are really hard to understand. The same with some of the British ones are hard for us to understand too. I'm going to try something which most
so
of
you
you
say
don't
that
even think about as an English accent, but this is has probably, well, an enormous number of English speakers. So I'll put this on.
sorry, I want some precision. You say that the English accent
Pods
is
handles the
close
driving.
to a Canadian
Pack at your
accent?
pace, store your things in.
My name is Deepika and I'm an English teacher from India. I run.
Is close to Canadian accent?
What?
I asked the question, do you say that Irish accent is close to Canadian accent?
The accent in the United States and Canada are pretty close, yes. There are certain things like if you, the word O-U-T, they would maybe say out instead of out. But, you know, it's not nearly as different as these other accents are.
No, you didn't get me well. I asked about Irish accent and Canadian accent. What about Irish accent is close to Canadian accent or not?
No, Canadian accent is much closer to the United States accent.
Okay.
Much closer.
Okay.
In fact, we can listen to people from Canada talking and we can think they're from the United States, and that won't happen with an English person.
Okay.
This
Run the account Acquiring on Instagram, and I talk about global English and English as a lingua franca, and I bust some myths about native speakerism, all while teaching you how you can acquire the best version of your existing English. And today I wanted to share a little bit about the English language,
Can I speak again?
the English variety in India. So English came to India in the 1600s through the British, of course, and it was around the 1830s that they started to incorporate English instruction in schools. So it was made mandatory in some parts of the country for children to learn English in schools, while the adults who were working in the government were starting to use English for, you know, day-to-day government activities. And through that, of course, English spread, and now in a lot of major areas in India, now in 2021, English is a lingua franca, which means that English is the language that is used as a transaction language between people who don't speak the same language.
I'm going to go ahead and pause this here. So you get at least a flavor for the Indian version of English, which has certain similarities with British English.
But this girl speaks very American English.
Well, it's more neutral than most. Yeah, that's true. Let's see, I'm going to go to the end of this, which has an interesting one.
Hi everyone, David here from speaklikedavid.com, and I'm going to be answering the question, where's your accent from? It's kind of complicated because I'm actually not a native English speaker.
Does anybody know where he's from? Probably not.
So I can't just say, oh, it's American or British, or it's from this particular town or part of countries like that. I'm actually Indian, but I was not born in India. I was born and raised in Brunei. That's a tiny country in Southeast Asia. But I don't have an Indian accent. I don't have a Bruneian accent either. And that goes back to how I actually learned English. From a very young age, I was immersed into the English language through TV shows. And I'm talking about shows like Sesame Street, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Bugs Bunny and the Looney Tunes, Dexter's Laboratory, Johnny Bravo, shows like that. And all of the main characters in all of my favorite childhood TV shows were North American characters. They had, you know, different accents from various parts of North America. And that ended up being the strongest influence that I had. These were my role models when it came to how to communicate in English. And so I ended up picking up a lot of the way they spoke. Now, I don't have what can strictly be called an American or Canadian accent because
But I'll interrupt there and say that if I were to meet him, I would assume that he's from the United States. Although he learned his English from watching shows on TV.
Yeah.
The education system in Brunei teaches British English. Brunei is a Commonwealth country, and so I spell words the British way. I write color with a U. I use words like rubbish, and I still pronounce aluminium the right way as aluminium and not aluminum. So
see here, he's saying that the British say aluminium the right way as opposed to aluminum.
So it's probably most accurate to say that I have an international accent because it is, in fact, the product of a whole range of different influences from across the globe.
Thank you, David. I love that we're ending on internationalized English accents because I think they are so rarely talked about in course books and in language classes, but they are so common. When I lived in Hong Kong, I had lots of friends who had a kind of international English accent because they had myriad influences on their English. The TV they watched.
I'm gonna stop it here. Just it's very interesting, but we need to have a little bit of discussion. So I'm going to stop sharing screen. Okay, well, I hope that I know this was a little bit unusual for a presentation today, but I hope that it was interesting and that you learned something about not only the accents in the United States, but also in the world. So hopefully that was something new that you had not been exposed to.
And
before.
what is something you want for next time before time is over?
Are you going to talk about a specific accent in one country or?
I'm sorry, can you answer?
What did you ask, Lina?
She's asking, what else would you like to study in the future? What
Okay.
subjects?
Okay.
Yes, Yves Donald.
Yes, I want you to give us advice about improving listening skill. I know that by learning the different accent is a part of improved listening. If you have more advice, it will be good for you to teach to us. What can I do to improve listening?
You know, I wonder if maybe it would be helpful to look at the linked speech again, because the example that you gave of, well, what was it? What do you want to, let me go back up in the chat and find where that was.
I think to improve listening, you have to listen, maybe watch TV in English because you're in a different country. Well, you're in the US, so watch watch TV in English. Also, there is some websites that you just listen to English, you know, so that's what the best thing for improving your listening is.
One thing you can do too with YouTube is if it's too fast, you can actually slow it down. So that would be helpful as well.
The ESL Cafe, there's several things to improve your listening. But I think when you go with groups, I don't know, but you know, I know in our town, there's seniors, you're too young, but there's groups of people you can get together for maybe volunteer or do something, and you listen to the language. Yeah, that's the best.
Okay, so at the end, listening is a matter of practice.
It's a matter of practice.
Yeah,
it's like speaking. It's a matter of practice.
Okay.
My question to you all is, what?
Slang. Mike is suggesting slang as well.
Slangs. We've done it, but we can do it again. Slangs, we've done idioms. Well, we've been doing this for almost 4 years, so we've done almost everything. But if we just like to ask you, because what are you interested in? And if you come back next time, we'll do it.
Okay.
Maybe
Well,
I don't know, but maybe we can check something like the use of the phrasal verbs, because we have a lot of them, and I don't know if it is possible or it is a lesson that we have done.
we have done everything. So yes, we've done phrasal verbs,
Because
but
it's almost 4
that's
years.
yeah, it's not a problem. We repeat.
We can
So-
review. I don't know.
Yeah, that's a good idea too.
Yeah, what about if we repeat, if you say, because you are mentioning that all the topics have already been taught.
No,
I would
and that's
like
not a
to,
problem.
yeah.
They've been
I would
taught
like
more than
to
once.
learn something about
Yes.
idioms.
Okay.
Idioms
Yes.
like it's raining cats and dogs, something like that, and also phrasal verbs, because
Yeah.
I have
idioms
some
we did-
difficulties in using those topics.
Idioms we did
Please.
not too long ago. It was maybe
Yeah,
what,
I
a
just
couple of
wonder,
months ago or something.
The reason I ask is, are you interested more in things you can use in your classroom or things for you personally? See, there's two different things. If
Okay.
it's things that you want to use for your students, because I have so many books, so many lessons already made. So is it for your students that you want stuff to be done that all you can do is copy and give it to them? Or is it things for your own knowledge? That's two different things.
In my case, for personal development and for my personal knowledge, because I need to communicate with others, and so that's some phrases or phrasal verbs that it's personally that I want to learn, and idioms and slangs.
Okay.
Yes.
See, Gloria
Yes.
has her hand up.
All that we learn with you for our own development, so it will be for our students too. So I think something that serve for all of us.
Thank you.
Yes, I totally agree with you. I would like to learn more about idioms, but maybe we can take a topic, maybe a specific country, and we can, or the country that we are from, and we can use the idioms using description, or I don't know, something like that. It's more like personal, no? In order to practice our English.
Yeah.
So this will be in the conversation part.
Could be.
Yeah, I'm writing this down.
We write so we don't forget.
Yeah, okay.
We write it. So,
Okay, good idea. Carlos, you had an idea?
Yes, I would like to suggest 3 topics. I have 3 suggestions. The first, have something dumb, because we usually have trouble understanding why. In Spanish, it's easy to say me corté el pelo, but in English, you really have to say I had my hair cut by the stylist, or I went to the hairdresser to have my hair cut. So it's not the same. That's the first. The second is about crime and punishment, the law. For example, the vocabulary is extensive. You can speak about different kinds of thief. Different kinds of thefts: car theft, pickpocketing, shoplifting. There are different. The vocabulary is huge. Yeah, we have different words for that, and then the punishment that they deserve. For example, community service, the capital punishment, and things like that. Then the other one, the third, is milestones. Milestones, the way that you, depending on the, okay, I was reading about this. In English, you can, usually you divide uh, what a person must do or must have done according to the age. For example, a successful person must have won a spelling bee at 10 years old, and many other things that you are supposed to do by some age. So that was what I was thinking.
Good ideas for conversation.
Those are great ideas, actually.
You know, maybe we have the wrong Crockers here for the law part of it, though. I have 3 brothers and 2 sister-in-laws who are attorneys. Probably do a better job than I would,
And
but yeah, we can.
Thank you.
and my favorite sister-in-law was born very, very poor in Kentucky, and she became a judge.
Oh my God, congratulations.
I know, and she is a girl that she said her brothers, they're from an Irish family. They fought over a watermelon. That's how poor they were. They didn't have enough to eat. And now she is.
And now she's retired, but yeah,
she's retired. She was a judge, and she's so generous. Anyway, I like them all, but she's the closest to me.
Well, we were going to have a conversation about a continuation of Francis Bailey's talk about memory and about how we use that in the classroom. Would anybody like to weigh in on that and tell us about how in your classroom you tried to solve the problem of really short,
I
memory?
think it's interesting. Yes, yes. Because now there are something that in Bolivia are talking about is inteligencia.
The different intelligences?
Now they are talking about a special name for inteligencia virtual or something like that. I will check.
Artificial intelligence?
Artificial, the artificial intelligence.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's those tech people get involved with that.
Will be interesting.
Good evening.
Yes.
Hello.
Good
Yes.
evening, Mr. Crocker. Good evening, Miss. How are you? Nice
Well.
to meet you. It's the first time that I am over here.
Welcome.
And I am really, I think that's really fantastic, your topics. And say you something about my experience about accents. I used to live in New York, and I used to take orders from fast food restaurant, and I used to get about 200 orders every day. And I had experience interacting my language with people all around the world. Asian people from Egypt, Irish, Spanish, and different kind, about countries. But let me tell you something. The tip that I got for understanding that people, it was, believe me, honestly, using body language in most of cases. Because sometimes, and let me tell you, this is about my experience, because I used to work over there about 13 years. So sometimes I couldn't understand some orders from people around the world. And I used to call my manager and say, please help me. And the manager comes and try to understand too. They, believe me, never understand anybody. Nobody understands some people. And all the time I try to use the body language. That's why I suggest you a topic about the correct use of body language. That is my
That is,
opinion.
that's excellent, because did you work at McDonald's?
Yes, and I KFC too. And I got some funny experiences about that.
Well, we're from the K of KFC. We're from Kentucky.
Yes, yes, that's why. But I think it's fantastic for you, for me, for everybody. Is really interesting, and I got today, thanks God, the opportunity to meet to this beautiful group. Thank you so
Well,
much.
you know, this is interesting, Jeanette, because when I started teaching 40 years ago, I worked for 40 years at the university. That was the big topic, teach body language.
Yes.
That was
Yes.
the big topic.
Yes.
We have a lot of good ideas,
Yeah. But I
particularly
think it's
for
very practical, it's very practical because, okay, if you are some different countries like Latin American country, I am from Ecuador. In my classroom, when I was young, my teacher used to talk in English, but that English is not real. It wasn't real English. It's different when you are living, for example, in United
Of
States.
course.
It's
Yeah, it's
different.
different.
The
Yeah.
English that you are learning in class is totally different. That's why I suggest the body language when you need.
good point.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. That's my opinion. I hope it is useful for you.
Well,
Yeah, it makes
you had some great suggestions for future classes.
Thank you
that
so
makes
much.
sense. That makes sense. That makes sense.
That's funny. It's body language.
Does anybody else want to share anything tonight before we end the class?
No, I just want to thank you, both of you. I just learned, and even I remember, you made me go back to the past and when I was learning all those kind of stuff, and the different languages, accent. And now when someone from the United States tell me, Karen, if you don't know, if you don't understand a Midland accent, you don't speak English. So to say,
Well,
no way.
The New York accent is not a Midland accent.
Yeah, okay, I'm going to,
And
I
there are
learned
many
that.
New York accents. My son-in-law is from Connecticut. He has a pretty neutral accent.
Yeah.
That you can't tell where he's from, but
And you
people from very
too.
close to him. I mean, New York's just, an
But
hour away or
I,
something.
you
And they
both,
have people there that I
you
cannot
two
understand.
speak like a neutral, like neutral English. I mean, I know that I remember when I was in Lexington and there were many people like and what people from the university and the students and then other people, and then I just, hey, Lina and her husband and other people, they speak like a standard or like neutral accent. So at the beginning, I thought, oh my God, this is in the center of the United States, and I am not sure if I am going to understand. But suddenly, voila, everybody speak like, oh my God, I can't understand. So, and that's how I realized that I don't know if my perception, but I understood when I was living in Lexington, I understood most of all of the people there. So, but when I went to the north, it was a little difficult to understand for me.
Or in
So
any direction. Really, Lexington in Kentucky is sort of it's one of the most educated parts of the state. So people tend to have a less regional accent. But if you go, but there are many people in Lexington that have a sort of a rural Southern accent, and I can do it. I grew up in that culture. I can certainly you know, I can talk like people I grew up with, and no problem for me to talk like that. I can do that. You know, that's something that I can speak that dialect, but
Yeah,
you know,
it's
most
like
people in Lexington don't speak that dialect. But you go, you know, half an hour in any direction, and you're hearing that pretty commonly. So yeah,
yeah. So
it depends, and it
well,
depends on the
we were
socioeconomic group.
blessed. We were blessed because we went there.
Well,
I don't
good.
know.
I'm
Glad you enjoyed
I'm
it.
glad you
We
feel
were
that
lucky
way.
to have you. We
Yeah,
loved having that group here.
it was the best time of my life being there.
Well, I'm happy that it was. I'm proud.
Anybody else have any comments before we call it quits
Yeah.
for the night?
Yeah, me. The
Yes.
previous participation of the woman who spoke about her experience in working at Kiev. I don't know where it was.
KFC and
Yeah,
McDonald's,
KFC.
yes.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
I think she's very right. Most of us, when we are teachers and we are in the classroom, we teach following us a lesson plan, vocabulary, contents from the book. But in our reality, in the real life and real situation, as teachers, we follow something that we have already planned: vocabulary, grammar, reading, something like that, right? But in our reality, when we communicate, when we meet new people like you, like others, I don't know how many are we in this meeting. Most of us have different accents, right?
Sure.
And to understand, I think we need more slangs, more idioms, more phrasal verbs, and conversations and topics about real life, right? Not in the classroom. So that's why I agree with the person who suggests to learn about body language, and the others who suggest the topics about some topics that you are taking notes, and we're gonna continue learning and trying to share each other's.
Well, I would say this, that one of the best ways to experience a more normal real life English is just to watch things on TV, or, you know, to read things in the newspaper. There are many opportunities nowadays that when I was young, we didn't have the internet, you know, but now anybody that wants to can go on and learn about anything on YouTube, for example. And
You know what I'd like is for Martha from Greece.
I share this point of view. There is more of tools now. We help people to learn language in general and English in particular. That is true. I share this point of view.
Well, I think Martha from Greece has something to teach us too, because we have students. I saw a presentation she did, and some of us here did, about dyslexia, because most of your students and many of mine, including my daughter, my youngest daughter, that is now 35 years old, had dyslexia.
Yeah.
And
What that means, dyslexia?
Well, Martha, can you tell them what dyslexia is?
Problems to talk or write.
Okay.
Not so
Martha.
much about talking. It's not about talking. It's about how they
right.
How okay, so when they read, they have they need more time to process the images that they see. I'm talking about the letters. They might see letters in the wrong order, and so they might find it difficult to read and understand what they are reading. They also have problems with memory. They have shorter memory in some cases, so they need extra effort to do things that we consider pretty easy to do.
And she gave a very nice presentation about dyslexia. And of course, that's close to me because my daughter had dyslexia. So her reading, she did not learn. She's a teacher now. And but she learned to read much like my granddaughter now, who's 6, can read very well. But my daughter, when she was 6 or close or 10, could not read well.
Cause of dyslexia.
Yeah, and so that's a common thing, and every country has it. It's not rich or poor or whatever. It's everybody has dyslexia, and that's an interesting topic to me.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're hoping that someday Martha will teach us these things in a class.
Yeah, Martha can teach us, because I'll tell you, there's not enough teachers that today, there or here, that know about dyslexia.
Or learning disabilities.
Yeah, it's a shame because the numbers are, the number of people that have learning the difficulties is increasing every day because it's a genetic thing. It's not, you're born with that, and parents pass it to children, and the numbers are increasing every day.
Yeah,
of course there are all other reasons that these numbers increase. For example, one of the reasons is that women in our days have children in older ages than they used to in the past. So this is one of the reasons that the dyslexia numbers have increased.
But it's nothing to do with intelligence. They're very
nothing with
a different kind of intelligence.
It's difficult to read because they saw some letters one inside the other, so they have that problem when they read and also when they write, of course.
Yeah.
Well, with that, we're going to have to end the lesson and thank everyone for all of your wonderful ideas. And we'll try to incorporate some of these in the next class.
And by the way,